Her father told her not long before he died, when she was 7 years old, if you see someone drowning, you must jump in and save them, whether you can swim or not. She did not realize years later how these words would encourage her to do what needed to be done. I'm speaking of Irena Sendler, a Polish social worker during World War II. March is Women's History Month, and I would like to dedicate this speech to this brave Polish woman, not more than 5 feet tall. Irena Sendler was 30 years old in 1940 when over 400,000 Jews were forced to live in the walls of the Warsaw Ghetto. She was the director of social work for the Department of Social Welfare. With special papers in her hand, she was one of the few non-Jews able to enter into the ghetto. In the ghetto, Irena saw deplorable conditions. So much despair, so much death. Like her physician father, who was devoted to saving lives, Irena was devoted to saving the most vulnerable population, the Jewish orphan children in the ghetto. Even though helping the Jews was illegal and a crime punishable by death, Irena smuggled over 800 orphans, and she placed them around the city in convents, orphanages, and hospitals before she and the underground coordinated their efforts in 1942. In order to return the children to their families after the war, she promised the Jewish parents that she would write their names down on a piece of paper, and she would keep track of them that way. And she put these papers inside of jars, and she buried them inside her garden across the street from the German barracks. Irena was arrested on October 20th, 1943, and was sent to prison where she was brutally tortured and beaten, fracturing both her feet and her legs. After several attempts by the Gestapo to try to get her to reveal her accomplices and the names of the children, they sentenced her to death by firing squad. The day of her execution, the underground bribed the guards, and Irena was allowed to escape. She remained hidden during the war and continued her work until the Soviets liberated her in 1945. True to her word, she dug up the jars and she began to work finding the children and their families. However, she discovered almost all the parents had died in the Treblinka camp. She did her best, however, to place them with her relatives and some in orphanages. Irene did not openly speak of her work during the war. She often had nightmares that plagued her and images of brutality and death, wishing she could save just one more life. She became known during the war as the Warsaw Angel, the angel of the Warsaw Ghetto. This jar, though only has 100 names, represents over 2,500 Jewish children that Irena and her co-workers saved. Irena died May 2008 at the age of 98, but not before receiving her due recognition. In 1999, 4 high school students from Kansas, looking for a subject for their History Day project, unearthed Irena's story. They were so moved by what they read and heard about Irena that they wrote a play, and the play is called Life in a Jar. At the end of each performance, she would leave a jar for donations at the back door, and she would give the money to Irena for her care. The play became so well known, they performed it over all of the United States, and this sparked the interest of the whole international community. Since then, Irena has been has been recognized internationally and most importantly in her own country, receiving several awards and honors and plaques for the work she did in preserving life. Irena Sendler's story is a story of remarkable courage, of love, of reparation, and of hope. Irena's story encourages us to do what is right and help those most needy, even though we may not always be equipped to do it. Irena's story shows us that we never know what we are capable of doing until it is required of us. And lastly, Irena's story teaches us that the heart of love and respect for others will guide us to do what we think is impossible. Every child, with my help, is the justification of my existence on this earth, and not a title to glory. Irena Sendler. Thank you. I almost stopped.